That's probably going to be the key to success yet. Couple smart build orders, nice timings, try to be as clean as possible. We're going to kick it off here on Babylon. In the bottom right side, representing his new team, Twisted Minds, the last Brutals in the tournament. This is Classic.
And the man that took the whole scene by storm in 2018, and it was never the same again. The great Jonas Atala. It is Serral.
It's only the third time we get to see Serral this weekend, as he played his opening 2 series on Friday. He won both of them. And after that, he basically had the Saturday off. He could just relax a little bit. Knowing Serral, he went for a little walk or two, tiny coffee break. He's a big fan of those. Not a guy that shows up at the venue and then plays 10 hours on the Saturday. He's been pretty vocal about it. He said, if I'm not ready, a couple days leading up to the event, I will never be ready, and it doesn't make too much sense to get a whole bunch of extra games in. It's better to just make sure you're as relaxed as possible and then just bring your A game when it matters the most.
And that's all he brings these days, isn't it? His A game. I really feel that even at Katowice, he didn't play bad by any means, but ever since, it's just anybody that stood in his way, he's just knocked him and pushed him aside. And here he did go for a nice early hatchery. A little bit earlier than normal, I do feel. Gets his spawning pool up, but no gas on the go thus far. There will start. But yeah, you're right, Serral. I think just getting through that winner stage quite nice and quickly for him. Having the day off afterwards. He does like Sweden. He's not too far away from home. Taking it easy, but all refreshed. We're going to be seeing tip-top notch Serral over here.
Yeah, he said it's one of his favorite places to go because it's very similar to Finland. And obviously it's a very easy journey for him as well. Classic, of course, had a much longer journey, but he's been here for quite a few days now, so he should be well adjusted to everything. We're going to expect a lot of Oracle openings here, and then the real question is Classic always a double Oracle guy? Is he going to go triple Oracle guy? And how many times is he willing to switch it up? Are we going to see some straight up Twilight builds coming out of the Korean? Seems like that's not going to be the case in the first game, but just because it's Stargate, it doesn't mean that Serral now immediately knows what the plan is of Classic, because there are so many ways as a Protoss to follow this up.
Yeah, and I mean, Classic already showcased that he will take a different approach, especially in those PvPs. He's like, no, I'm going to do it my style kind of thing, and just showcase some very high-level play. No gas, by the way, here on Babylon from Serral. How do you feel about that one? Because normally they like to get that link speed, just to make sure they're safe against any early adepts, knocking the probe off the map and such. But here, very conserved is Serral.
Yeah, this maybe opens the door for Classic to just get 2 adepts quickly to the other side of the map, and these adepts should have a lot of potential because link speed is going to take a little while. I do believe that adept shade went in far enough to see the timing of that extractor, and now it'd honestly be almost a missed opportunity if Classic doesn't at least try to make some magic happen with his first 2 adepts, because that's going to be very difficult for Serral to deal with. Basically, all he can do is always have the queens in the correct position, but it's not just the adepts that Serral needs to worry about, it's obviously that first Oracle as well.
I think Classic's kind of locked onto this a little bit, because making an extra adept right now, getting an extra gateway as well before the third Nexus drops down. Ooh, that's a bit of a leery little adept shade in there, but I kind of like it, if he's getting 3 drones are getting out of there, might get a 4th one here, trying to block it there with the body. That was nice play out of Classic, but good Spore making that to just save the drones.
Yeah, it was very cool because Serral obviously tried to already do that with one of the first drones that went down, but those shots arrived a little bit too quickly as this Oracle is going to show up. Only a single queen in the natural. Not necessarily the cleanest start here from Serral. We've seen plenty of ZVPs where Serral just does not lose a drone in the first 6 or 7 minutes, and he makes it look easy, and other Zerg players sit there and wonder, how is it possible? How are you not losing any adepts, or how are you not losing any drones against adepts or oracles? But just after Serral didn't necessarily have the best start, he gets an Oracle pretty much for free. Of course, good job by Serral hunting it down, but that's still a mistake on the side of Classic.
I think it certainly is. You should be able to get your Oracles out of there. And we did see Classic visually, a bit of gritting of the teeth and a bit of a head shake at that one, because having a few Oracles alive and this many Adepts being aggressive against no link speed, you can definitely cause some chaos.
No, Serral, Classic was probably feeling it a little bit, right? Sure, he lost one of the Adepts, but he's like, whoa, I got 6 drones before minute 5. Like, that's honestly pretty unheard of. It's very unlikely that he's going to get 6 drones in the second or the third game this early into a game. So a good start suddenly feels a whole lot less good because you lost an Oracle recklessly. Of course, Serral did a good job moving those queens forward to the edge of creep to get those extra shots off, but that really was all on Classic, as Classic lets the Adept Shade finish up into the natural, is once more going to find a couple of drones. It's 4 at first. I think he could have gotten a 5th, but it seems like he's busy controlling his Oracle.
Yeah, he was looking to get a stasis or something over there in the main, but realizing, that spawn's a little bit close, and I got queens on my tail. Did secure a nice third, and we look at the probe and drone count. Protoss is doing pretty well on that front. Normally they do take a little bit of a lead as the Zerg's getting things together, but you do see that Serral is doing nothing but droning at this point, and now after that first few blips there, losing a few drones, he's looking pretty solid.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously +1 is on the way. Blink is more than halfway done. So Classic is also getting a relatively quick robo, which is obviously something that's going to be important in case Serral would double down on Ro8's production and be a bit more aggressive than we're used to from Serral. But I don't think Classic really needs to worry about Serral being aggressive anytime soon. Probably most action is going to take place on Serral's side of the map. Classic is going to flirt with the Zerg army right on the edge of creep, try to push back the creep non-stop, and obviously make sure that he doesn't miss any links running by in the natural or main base, or bane link connections later on, which obviously we are expecting Serral to add in some bane links, as he's already working on +1 melee.
Yeah, a lot of the Protoss these days, they do work with 3 Oracles when they're doing this kind of stuff. But I see a Robo Bait and a very quick second Robo facility. So Classic is already mixing things up a little bit here, but Serral still has to respect this little push out. He still has to be careful, because in the blink of an eye, a Protoss can get a lot of units out very quickly, but Serral, he's playing good. He's just kind of delaying, scouting, and seeing whatever is going on.
I mean, Serral's playing all right, but Classic is definitely playing good. 7 minutes in, I think this is a position that most Protoss players would absolutely sign for. He's on 3 bases. He still has a minor worker lead. Serral's definitely not running away with this game economically. That second Robo is on the way. The Robo base is pretty much done. And as long as Classic doesn't do anything silly with his Stalkers, he should be fine. This is where these Oracles are really needed. One Oracle is going to show up, activate Pulsar Beam. And this is really where Classic is going to miss that Oracle that he lost in the beginning of the game, because if there are 2 Oracles, it's just so much less likely that Serral's able to get that kind of a surround with Zerglings when the numbers are this small, all things considered.
Serral very good about the scouting, as is his trademark these days. Get to see that double Robo pump in. I mean, those 2 Colossus are very quick. And one thing that is decent against these big Robo pushes is a lot of Ro8 Ravager Banelings, kind of hard to deal with that. But Serral is getting a very quick infestation pit, and the micro on both sides here, tip-top.
Yeah, that reminds me of a couple of the games we saw from him in Katowice as well, where Serral just gets the hive ridiculously quick, and he will often have Vipers ready for the first time the Protoss is truly willing to commit with the 3 Colossus, maybe an Immortal and a War Prism right on the edge of a 3rd base or a 4th base. But because Serral lost a few more drones than he usually does, I think it's going to be a bit unlikely that Serral is going to have Vipers the first time Classic wants to be aggressive. Serral, however, in typical Serral trademark fashion, is still going to try, but I honestly think that Classic should have a little window where he can fight before those Vipers are out, as he blinks forwards as well. Snipes 2 Queens, will lose a couple Stalkers in the process, but getting 2 Queens that quickly, honestly, that's all right for Classic.
You know, I was a bit worried about the aggressive blink there, but he's doing a good job of utilizing this Warp Prism to kind of save these Stalkers that are getting shot by those slow-firing roaches here, but this is a very quick timing here, Kev. Like, those are some big upgrades coming online. Can't forget he's on double Forge behind this, and he is taking a 4th base, so he's by no means all in, but he has to try and get something done with this kind of timing.
Yeah, because Classic's army is so much better when there are no Vipers than when there are Vipers, and I'm sure that's something he knows, but Serral could actually get a freebie here. There is 1 Adept in the wall there, and that basically saves the Colossus, otherwise the Roaches could have just right-clicked right next to them. Serral is just trying to buy some time for Baneling speed, which is close to finishing up. I don't think Serral can realistically accomplish anything here near a battery and a cannon. But as long as Serral is buying time, forcing Classic to be worried about a run by, worried about an attack on the 4th, take a look at that production tab, and the first Viper is fired up. And obviously, once Serral gets a couple Vipers out, these Colossus are less intimidating. Classic is aware of it though, and he's going to go for it. And only a single Viper is not going to have a whole lot of energy. Like, this is going to be a very scary minute for Serral.
Absolutely. So it's going to take a good 20 seconds or so for that Viper to pop out and then get the energy on top of that. But look at his spread here, Kevin. That is a lot of blue Zerg, but Classic's very well set up for this. Serral can't go into it. And the start of this engagement, I mean, Serral is trying to buy time, isn't he? He's not looking for the fight directly unless it's a really good one, but Classic, He's being so patient about this.
Serral's very low on gas, and he has just spent way more of that gas on a couple of extra banelings, but he lost a decent amount the first time he tried to run into that monstrous Protoss army. Single Viper does get an abduct, but it doesn't even get the kill on the Colossus as the War Prism saves it. And I think if Classic just keeps on microing his army properly here, he should be able to survive. It is a lot of Zerg though. Stalker's trying to do that thing. A couple of the Colossus are falling, and especially the Colossi at the bottom side of our screen were so exposed. And Classic goes from 5 Colossus to 1. He does, however, still have a whole bunch of Blink Stalkers.
And that 2-1 upgraded as well. I mean, taking out the Colossus is one thing. That means your Zerglings are definitely going to be better, but these Roaches, if they can get good wraparounds on this army, because it's such a brittle Protoss army, and with no real means of escape, just blinking backwards, but holy crap, it's getting big here, Kev.
A couple of disruptors on the way. That's obviously very promising for Classic, who's still looking quite alright. I'm sure that he wished he would have been able to save a Colossus or 2 extra in that previous fight, but it wasn't all that bad because of those upgrades that you mentioned. The Double Forge has been doing its thing. Serral has a couple of links on the other side of the map, and he will trap 2 of these Stalkers, gets the pick off. Obviously, small victory there for Serral, but Classic is still a 4-base Protoss. And Serral is a bit gas-starved. He still does not have a whole lot of gas in the bank, and that's going to make it really hard to get those extra Vipers out to start dealing with these disruptors.
I mean, these Stalkers trying to take out the Viper. He did get a really good snipe there, so will keep this Colossus alive. I love the spread of the Lings. They're just kind of marching in there, acting as meat shields, but there's so much Protoss everywhere you look. I mean, Stalkers, they don't deal exactly the most damage, but 17 probes do go down. That is the joy of +2 banelings over there.
Yeah, that's the big one for Serral right there. 19 probes in the end falling. While Serral didn't overcommit with his fight, he was obviously not going to clean up the Protoss army, but he does get a lot of economic damage, and there's still a couple of things happening in the 3rd base of Classic. Classic seems like he cannot be bothered. He just wants to get some value out of the fact that he's got 3 important robo units here, and Serral does not really have a good answer for them. One of these Purification Novas did connect in a pretty decent way, and Serral's going to be forced to disengage, but we've got Baneling run by number 2, and Classic goes from -19 workers to -31. This Protoss army pretty much needs to get the job done, and I'm afraid it's just barely not big enough for Classic.
I mean, Serral, he's again pushed back a little bit here, but the supply does not lie. He is rich behind this. The last Colossus does fall. Only Stalkers left over, and as these Lings start marching in, being the cannon fodder, being the damage dealer, look at that Zerg army, Kev. That is more than enough, I think, especially with 48 Lings in production.
Yeah, Serral obviously doesn't need to chase up that ramp. Serral knows the time is on his side at this point. He has taken a lot of probes out on the other side of the map, and the only thing that Classic can really do is warp in a few more robo units. The doors are wide open at the 3rd base, so it's not just Baneling run-bys that are going to be a problem, Ling run-bys as well, especially because these Lings, of course, have Adreno glands, and they are even working towards +3. Classic is running out of steam. He knows that he's going to try, but he's fine a few Stalkers. They really do not match up well against this, well, more diverse Zerg army. Couple Lings, couple Banelings, Roaches, Ravagers. Serral does not need to fight near the battery, so he won't. Instead, he's just going to try to take down a few more probes.
The way that Serral's just kind of... he's torn him apart from the inside. I actually thought he was going to deal with that just then, but no, 14 more probes. How many workers have died this game thus far? I mean, Serral's done a damn good job. 45 probes. Classic is mortally wounded. And 34 probes. 39 Banelings on the way. This pixie Protoss army is just not enough. There's more Banelings than anything else on the field. And I feel that this one's kind of in the bag.
Classic goes for a very tiny recall there, but there really wasn't a whole lot of army to save anymore. It's an unfair fight at this point. No matter how good your Blink Stalker micro is, you cannot out-micro the Swarm. And Serral will take a 1-0 lead after a victory on Babylon. As a little speech with himself. Solid game there by Serral, but definitely not as flawless as we've seen some of his other ZVPs. And I'm sure that Classic will be absolutely kicking himself for losing that first Oracle, because that was just super unnecessary, a complete unforced error. If he would have sent it towards the bottom side of the map or a bit further away from the Queens, like that Oracle would have came in so handy in these specific moments where it's a lot of Lings mostly chasing down that Blink Stalker army. That's where you need these Oracles to activate Pulsar Beam.
Yeah, or even just having like, because he only went for a 2 Oracle build as well, so losing 50% of them when you needlessly should. But I gotta say, the micro here from Classic was actually really good. These Vipers didn't really get that much done. As soon as they got moved over, it was like, okay, quickly pick it up with the War Prism and stuff, but Serral did what he needed to. He just cut his legs off and then just won the economy game. Very nice RTS play.
I mean, the spread was beautiful there by Classic, but at one point the 3 Colossi at the bottom side of our screen, they were very exposed, and it was just roaches getting on top of them. And since the Warp Prism was busy warping in Stalkers, it wasn't just able to save a couple of these Colossus. And I think maybe if Classic has like a pylon and a gateway here, so you can actually just use that Warp Prism to pick up these important robo units, drop them in the back of the army. I think there was slightly more potential in that Protoss army than Classic managed to get out of it in the end.
Certainly, but as far as first games go, when you go up against Serral, if you're a Protoss player, I think if we look at that Oracle not dying there, maybe we're looking at a different game entirely, just because they are so pivotal. Players like MaxPax really utilize them to their full potential. The first 3 Oracles, even if they get bruised and battered, as long as they did something, they can do so much more later on.
And if we look back at some of the other CVPs that Serral has played, where he goes up against very similar styles, the quick double robo with the Robo Bay, he often gets like 2-3 Vipers ready for that very first push, and that was absolutely not the case this time. Unfortunately, it was not enough for this man. He's down 0-1, but he played a pretty solid game on Babylon. Let's see if he can continue that here on Gresbon, representing Twisted Minds, the last Protoss in our tournament. This is Classic.
And spawning over in the top left, representing Basilisk, it is Serral.
Serral is actually just going to be able to take his natural here immediately. And recently we had a little interview with Serral where I asked him about one of the openers that he had in his EVP, and he said he's basically very happy in every EVP that he plays if he can just take his natural. If he's not forced to expand elsewhere, some Zergs are kind of okay with it, right? It's like, yeah, it's a bit harder to get the economy going. Perhaps it's a little bit harder to protect your drones in the early game, but the nice thing about taking a different expanding your natural is obviously that you can get the creep forward a little bit easier, but Serral is old school, man. He just loves taking his natural, and apparently Classic has no problem with it.
No problem, and you know, I've been doing everything I could to absolutely make Serral's life hell, every little thing, so yeah, I'd absolutely bring that probe out very early, but feeling confident, feeling comfortable. I mean, the early game for Classic, you can't skip out on the fact that he saw that it was a gasless build, and he was like, you know what, get some Adepts in there, get some Oracles in there, killed a good, like, I don't know how many workers he killed, but it's a good 10 or so. And I mean, Serral's build was reasonably greedy. The gasless build meant he got like some extra queens early, some extra drones, so didn't hinder him too much. But yeah, Classic's play so far this tournament has been pretty darn solid.
I like that Classic got adventurous with the first 2 Adepts when he knew that there weren't that many Zerglings and that the Zerglings would obviously be slow. But I kind of wish that he would have shaded a bit further away from the Queens, because the Queens are the only real solid defense that Zerg has in the early game to deal with those Adepts. So the one place you don't want to shade is right next to these Queens, because Queens can obviously be a bit clumsy when they have to run after Adepts and still fire at the same time.
Yeah, certainly we do see a Stargate again for Classic. Now, for Protoss players these days, Stargate just allows you so many more options getting into the late game. Often with the Twilight Council type builds, you're really resorting to deal some damage, or you know, you've seen players like Creator where they have that massive flood of Adepts. And while I do think Classic is more than capable, this just shows a bit of confidence for me when I'm watching his play.
Yep. I do wonder if we're going to play it differently, right? Because obviously, I think Babylon's slightly smaller map than Gresbon, and if that's the build that Classic is a fan of, there's obviously nothing wrong with it for going for it in that first game. But doing the exact same build here on Gresbon, which is the larger map, I think that just makes it less likely that it's going to work, because Serral is going to have a little more time to get some extra value out of the superior economy that Zerg normally has, and it's just going to make it a bit easier for Serral to get access to that hive tech and make sure that the Vipers are out in time. So I hope that Classic has a different follow-up than he did in the first game.
We already see some change-ups by him, getting that Stalker out, so he'll be able to kill that Scouting Overlord. And I mean, the Scouting Overlord from the game before on Babylon just got a vision of everything. The Stargate before the Oracle even popped. This game, Serral, the Oracle normally comes over to deal with that Overlord, so you do get vision that way, but at least Classic on his side of things gets to know that, hey, I've dealt with that second Oracle on the way as well, and most likely it's going to be a nice third base, quickly followed up. I do see his minerals getting to that point, and yeah, bang on.
Of course, Serral had a decent amount of Ravages in that previous game, which is kind of mandatory, but I was a bit sad to see that Classic was so heavy on Stalker Colossus and that we didn't see a couple Sentries sprinkled into the mix, especially with the great force fields that Classic has been able to drop throughout this tournament so far. The War Prism control and the Sentry control is really what separated him from the other Protoss players in this tournament. And even if there are Ravages, that doesn't mean that Sentries are useless, because you can still drop force fields, wait for the Corrosive Bowels, renew these force fields, and especially on Babylon, which I think had a lot of choke points, a lot of tiny ramps, I feel like there was some serious value to be gained out of making a few Sentries.
Oh, that was very Larry from these Oracles, flying into not just 2 Queens, but the Spore as well, realizing he can't deal any damage. Behind this, Classic pumping out a few more gateways. Definitely going to be making most likely Stalkers. Oh, this could be a charge lock kind of build, right, behind all this?
Yeah, well, it's going to be Blink at first, but it can obviously be a much more committed version, right? Because last game we saw a Robo, we saw a Forge, later on we saw him at the second Forge, even though he kind of just stopped at 2-1 and he said, like, no, these are the upgrades I want to have. This time around, it seems that Classic wants to be a lot more aggressive in an earlier stage. So he's not going to wait for Colossus, he's not going to rush up to 4 bases, but you can really see how much more difficult it is for Classic to get those drone kills that he had in the previous game, and this looks a whole lot more like the ZVP early game from Serral that we are used to, where he makes it look easy to have these units in the correct position. Has he lost a drone yet? Is it 0 drones so far?
I think it's 0 drones, yeah.
It's a night and day difference, like 6 drones before the 5-minute mark or 0. That really changes everything in this matchup.
Yeah, Classic. He hasn't gone for a Forge with this build at all. So that tells me that he wants to hit hard, he wants to hit fast, and he probably wants to end the game very quickly with this, because getting that +1, it gives you a little bit of longevity. But 7 gateways I think he's got done as well. It's going to be a bit scary.
It's going to be very fun to keep an eye on the probe that Classic is absolutely sending out soon. Because if he wants to be that aggressive with this build, obviously we need a pylon on the other side of the map, because he's got no Robo, so he's got no War Prism. And if you want to keep on attacking with a bunch of Stalkers, if you really want to bring the fight to Serral, you of course need a pylon and a gateway on the other side of the map, because warping in units from home, and it's kind of feel like that would be painful. But he is dropping the Forge right now, Ben, so that kind of confused me a little, because I also thought that he was going to play this with a little more commitment than he's currently doing.
Yeah, like not syncing it up with this attack kind of thing definitely is a little bit surprising. Obviously, Protoss can do that, but yeah, maybe just hoping to throw Serral off with the timings a little bit of what he's used to. And here, tries to get a quick snipe in the Queen, but no bueno. And a few Stalkers will get caught out, but honestly, nice crisis management from Classic there. Does get out fairly unscathed.
There's a chance that he maybe tried to blind counter, right? Some sort of an ultra-aggressive build from Serral, but Serral not the guy to all-in all that often in this matchup, as the Stalkers are going to try to do Blink Stalker things, get in and out of range, fire a couple of shots, but obviously that doesn't hurt Serral all that much with the 4 bases that our Finnish Zerg is already working with and the 70 drones, and obviously Stalkers are very expensive, Roaches and Zerglings not that much. Classic is doing a good job here though, right on the edge of creep, this is where he wants to be. One of the Spore Crawlers try to move forward, Stalkers are going to deny that. Serral obviously knows that he just needs to buy time, make sure that he doesn't take a silly fight off creep, because every second that goes by is a very good one for Serral, because he's severely outmining Classic at the moment.
He certainly is. It might look like the Zerg is bleeding out now, but Serral, as long as he doesn't lose an economy or too many units, he's doing okay, because this Stalker army, it's kind of on a timeline here. It needs to get a lot of damage done. I mean, it is growing, and it's growing fairly rapidly, but as these big Zerg swarms come in,
Serral setting up a little surround. There's 20 or so Zerglings in the center of the map, so if Classic is going to overstep his boundaries, these Lings are going to come in from the right side. Roaches and Ravagers are in slightly higher numbers at this point. Serral in the end decided not to go for it. We'll just send those Lings to the other side of the map. I don't think there is a whole lot that the Zerglings can get done there. So Classic is starting to bleed out a few Stalkers. Definitely needs to warp in something quickly. You don't want to lose that battery for nothing. Seems like that battery will fall in the end, but at least no probe should go down. I mean, Classic is making some magic happen, but I just feel like it's not quite good enough.
I mean, he's doing good, man. Every time he runs forward, he snipes off a valuable unit like a Roach or a Queen or a Ravager, and this army from Serral is not big enough just yet, but I'm looking at his bank, he's spending like crazy. He's only on 69 drones, so super respecting the push as well.
There are 9 Queens though, and it's incredibly difficult for Stalkers to push in 9 Queens. Queens have decent range, and they can obviously drop Transfuse over and over again on the Roaches, on the Ravages. But Classic is trying to go up to 4 bases. Serral's already all over that, has a lot of Zerglings counterattacking. A single Adept is never going to be enough. The Stalker ball is big, but it's just so damn difficult to get up this ramp. Classic obviously would love to just stay in range of that hatchery, but Serral is doing whatever he can to make sure that Classic cannot get in a comfortable position on top of that ramp.
The time buying from Serral is really good, and also cutting off the head of the snake there, taking out that 4th base potential. So Classic more on a clock than ever. These slow boy Zealots as well. There's no charge on the way. We know that. Not sure if Serral does, but Classic's taking some cheeky fights over here, but a lot of Zerglings in production along with that Baneling Nest.
Nice little forward blink there. Can we take a look at the units lost resource tab? How close is that? Serral has lost 600 resources more, and that's, I think, numbers that Serral's completely okay with, as Classic absolutely needs to cancel that Nexus, and he will do that towards the end. So Serral right now with back-to-back denials on a 4th base attempt of Classic, and is also going to find a few probes here for the first time. There was no unit in the ramp there, actually.
Oh, wow, and you found a lot of probes just over here as well. So next 4th location, he knows all about it, and all of a sudden, Serral's like, I got you on the other side of the map. I can spread creep like crazy. I can get my Banelings on the go. My +2's almost done as well.
This is going to be very difficult for Classic to control. He's got Blinkstalker armies in basically 2 or 3 different locations. Very hard to get max value out of your Stalkers then. I think Classic is doing an alrighty job. Can obviously always blink to the high ground there. If I was Classic, I really wouldn't spread up my army like this. It's just so damn difficult to get all the blinks up that you want to get off. Serral does not quite have Baneling speed yet, but he's still finding some very good connections on Stalkers. Not something you normally want, but if you're rich and you're denying bases over and over again, you can get away with it. This was a slam dunk victory for Serral.
Serral's flourishing, man, behind this. Look, he's gone up to 75 drones. I think he's on 5 bases now. +2's about to hit. The Baneling speed's about to hit as well. And he's feeling so confident that he can take an infestation pit behind this. And Classic, more all-in than ever this game. Trying to take a 4th base along with the +2 and the charge, but he is on a clock. And Serral just again, is this like the 3rd or 4th Nexus cancelled at this point? It's got to be like 4th, yeah. Just not allowing him to grow.
And the beauty of Serral as well, that is the macro is always effortless on his side of the map. It's not just the 4 bases that he originally was working with. No, during all of that battling and the run-bys and denying Classic from getting extra bases, he did manage to get up a 5th base. He did even manage to get up a 6th base, cranking out a few more drones. Stalkers are going to try to do their thing, but if there's no battery to run to, these are really not pleasant fights for these Stalkers. There's a lot of Lings in the mix with +2 melee, a couple of Banelings making it so hard for these Stalkers to just stand their ground. And you were talking about number 4, well, I think we're about to get denial number 5, but first Serral wants to get a couple probes, and he's going to get a whole lot more than just a few, as we've already lost 6, and even that Nexus could have been in a tiny bit of trouble. There is the 5th cancel. This time around it's a kill, and Classic's supply has dropped to 86.
I mean, just 2 minutes ago it was like 30 supply in it, and even then it didn't look good for Classic, and now it looks absolutely awful for Classic. And this wasn't without trying, right? He was really pushing him. He went for that forgeless kind of style where he attacked with a lot of Stalkers. The Oracles did way better this time in the mid-fights than they did the previous game, but not being able to slow down Serral at all. Just absolutely unleashing. He's about to hit Hive this game, Kevin. He doesn't need a Hive, but he's getting the Hive, and now a big wraparound on this army. Lots of roaches in the midst of things. The Baneling's trying to chase him down with the Zerglings as well. And while all this is happening, losing probes behind it. Brutal.
The Swarm is here in all its glory, and Classic will type GG. Serral takes the 2-0 lead in his quarterfinals. That first game, I felt it was kind of a bumpy ride for Serral. It was honestly not smooth sailing. The second game, those are the ZVPs that we see so often from that man in Finland, where he's bulletproof in the early game, does not lose a single drone in the first 5 minutes, and even though I like the fact that Classic switched it up, right? He played a very different game. He was going to be a lot more aggressive off the Stalkers. I kind of feel like if we want to commit a little bit, then try to get a pylon up and a gateway up on the other side of the map. If we're playing a style without a robo, because clearly he was trying to make a whole lot of magic happen with these Stalkers. But if you're forced to warp in the Stalkers at home, I just feel like you're giving Serral too much time over and over again to get ready. And of course, Serral did a phenomenal job in denying a 4th base attempt of Classic.
Yeah, I like what you say about, in the first game especially, like, he's normally bulletproof. Like, this isn't quite characteristic, because the change from this game to that game, it was massive. The man from the north, bulletproof. He really is a man of iron, and his ZVP is scary. Because even when he's on the defensive, he's always doing something aggressive to make it very difficult. Like this game, there was no robo facility for the warp-ins, so these warp-ins had to be at home. Eventually, it was like 20 Protoss units having to defend these Zergling run-bys, and it was still getting damage done. And then as soon as +2's done, these Banelings just went crazy.
Yep, Serral even started already finding some value out of the Banelings before Baneling speed was done. Like at first it was all about the Lings and the Roaches and the Ravagers and a couple Queens to make sure that he would stabilize. But I think that this game overall was just a lot more convenient for Serral, a lot more comfortable, where he had those extra resources to work with that he kind of missed in the first game. And if you feel like you are a bit richer than your opponent, it's not that scary to send 20 or 24 Lings to the other side of the map, look for some freebies and a couple of pickups. And in the first game, it really felt that Serral needed every single unit he had out on the map to defend. And that's why for the longest time we saw almost nothing happening on Classic side of the map. This game was just a lot easier for Serral to play.
Yeah, Serral did have a day's break on the Saturday, given that he just cruised into the top 8. Maybe he needed a game to settle, but that last game was nothing short of excellent. Spawning over in the top left here, as our Red Protoss, maybe one final time, give it up for Classic.
The only Protoss to make it into the quarterfinals of the ESL SC2 Summer Championships. Unfortunately for that Protoss, he's going up against this man, who's just a Protoss killer. Well, he kills almost everything in the game. But in the bottom right side, we are looking at the main base of the man from Finland, representing Basilisk. Make some noise for Serral.
The dominance this man is showing this tournament is absolutely amazing. Just to go over how the group stage went for him, because he looked like he wasn't getting touched really. He took out Kelazor. Series against Dark, actually, considering how good Dark's ZVZ was. That was nice. We saw some late games out of them. We did see Serral reign supreme eventually, going up against Classic. Maybe one of the nicer draws for Serral. Very unfortunate for Classic. The winner does go on to play Raynor, which that is not an easy road, but
that's fireworks.
It is fireworks. Serral, though, he's looking clean, and he's been looking clean for quite some months as well. It's just, I don't think there's a player on the planet that I'm like, oh yeah, that's one that Serral really has to worry about. No, I feel like Serral is pretty much the favorite against anybody right now.
I don't think a lot of people will disagree with you, but I do also agree with the fact that getting a ZVP in the quarterfinals, that's basically what Serral's dreams are made of. Because going up against a Korean Zerg, it's always scary. We saw it a couple of months ago at IEM Katowice. Or even getting a Raynor has obviously been very scary for Serral in the past. And if Serral does win this series, he will face his teammate in the semifinals. But like, for instance, in a different tournament, you could have ran into a Bonnie or a Clem or Maru, right? And those are all very tricky opponents for Serral. Well, Serral may be the favorite, but he knows that he's going to have to bring his A+ game. But I think especially the ZVP draw, if Serral could have had it his way, I think this is exactly the draw that he would have went for.
I mean, if the talk of the town with the pro game is anything to go by, I can imagine all the kids, like, in the candy store, it's like, I want the Protoss, no, I want the Protoss, you know what I mean? But yeah, no, it's looking good for Serral so far. That first game, he was definitely pushed a little bit. Maybe a few fights went here, there. Maybe the Oracle stayed alive here. It will be a third Stargate opening in a row. And I don't hate it from Classic, because honestly, he is good with his Oracles. Like, he's one of the guys that really popularized Oracles a long time ago, back in his SKD days, and I just hope they can get something going, because that last game, he never got started.
Yeah, Neo-Humanity is a fun one, because obviously it has that unique base in the center of the map with the rich Vespian Geyser, which is most of the time a great thing for Zerg, but obviously Protoss players don't hate getting their hands on that one either, because that will allow you to get a whole bunch of additional Archons or a bunch of High Templars perhaps, as this first Adept is going on a journey, but Serral saves every single throne so far, doesn't even need to morph throne number 4 into something, and that is once more picture-perfect defense by the man from Finland. No drones lost, obviously a couple resources going down, but yeah, he's just not going to do it any better than that.
Unfazed, unfazed. Now, we do have the first Oracles coming out on the field. Serral, being Serral, will definitely have spotted that little Oracle flying out. Gets to see the position of this Stargate, the second gateway coming up as well. It's not a map where the choke point to the natural is super big, where you need that second gateway over there, but third Nexus starts off again.
And look at the positioning of the Queens. Yeah, Serral's pretty good. He's played a couple of ZVPs in his days. Now, Classic is still just gonna go for it. Activates Pulsar Beam, gets 2 drones, takes a decent amount of damage. That's not necessarily a trade that makes your Protoss heartbeat a whole lot faster, because that's just a little more real damage than you want to take. But it's always nice to at least get a couple points on the board. And cannot emphasize enough on the missed opportunity, I think, in that first game where Classic got 10 drones, but could have had even a few more if he didn't lose that one Oracle. That was a sweet start, and that's the kind of start that you kind of need as a Protoss when you play a PvZ against Serral. Second game could not get any economic damage, and obviously it didn't end all that well. We'll keep an eye on these oracles here in game 3 as, by the way, Classic dropping a Twilight Forge and a Robo all at the same time.
Yeah, this looks like he's feeling a bit more confident to go into that kind of, hey, okay, let's get the upgrades going, let's see how it goes. His Stalker micro has been really good. Like, it's been really good. And I was really missing that Warp Prism from him in that second game. But these Adepts in combination with an Oracle could be juicy, and a charge starts up for him as well. That confuses me a little bit because he did go for a very early 3rd and 4th gas here, but maybe it's going to be a Templar Archives at some point as well. Goes for something very, very spicy.
He also has a Forge already, right? So he can get Zealots with +1 and a couple of Archons, which reminds me a tiny bit of the build that Australia tried to bust out against Raynor. And I actually think Australia had a lot of potential with the Archons and the Warp Prism and the Zealots in the main base. However, Serral is not a greedy boy, as he did already build a Roach 1 and he snipes one of the Oracles. Does end up losing 5 drones. But I don't hate it that Classic is just playing a little bit more adventurous and just trying to disrupt the build order a bit more of Serral. So I think this is kind of working out. And honestly, I think what Classic is hoping for, that Serral would have gone for a very Ling-heavy style with +1 melee, and that Serral would hold out on the Roaches for a little while. That is not going to be the case, but obviously that's not the end of the world for Classic either, because he has already dropped the Robo Bay as well.
Yeah, there was a period of time where Serral was one of the only Zergs that was opting for the ranged missile attack over the melee attack. Granted, it was quite some time ago, maybe 6 months, but here, this is just very unfortunate. I think he must have sniffed something out, hadn't he, to go for that Roaches and the ranged missile. Very quick infestation pit from him as well.
Serral does not have Roach speed yet, right? Can we take a look at that?
I don't think so, no. That could definitely bite him in the butt a little bit, but using all those resources so far on other things, but seeing the Archon, you've got to be thinking, all right, I hope he remembers, because that is definitely one thing that can kind of slip up a little bit.
Yeah, I don't believe that any Zerg is really comfortable building 14, 15 Roaches while not firing up Roach speed. It's not the most expensive upgrade out there. We even have the Infestation Pit. Could be some Swarm Host play even though we don't get to see that very often of Serral, but he's got the drones for it, and there do come the Swarm Hosts. So this is not about a quick hive. We are going to see some Swarm Hosts, but he still does not have Roach speed. Now obviously you can still, Roaches on creep are still going to be kind of quick, but splitting slow Roaches off creep against Purification Novas, well, that's straight out of a Zerg nightmare.
It certainly is. I wonder if this Swarm Host choice comes out of the fact that Classic took this very forward 4th base, right? Maybe just wanting to utilize the position that you can get your Swarm Hosts in here. In fact, it's very nice. If you can get behind those rocks and launch a big bunch, there's nothing the Protoss can do about it.
Classic actually dropping a Fleet Beacon and a second Stargate while all of this is happening. Now, if he gets time to get a couple of these Stargate units out, whatever he decides to build, maybe that can become pretty awesome. But I feel like this is a bit over-ambitious. Like right now, we need to focus on surviving, keeping our probes alive, keeping our bases alive. And I think dropping a Stargate and a Fleet Beacon when our army supply is 41, meanwhile Serral's at 107, I think he's getting carried away, Ben.
Oh, and here it comes. Serral's being so careful. I mean, he has to be careful with his Roaches, right? Because he doesn't have the speed yet, but nice shield battery overcharge there. But the Locusts, they come in from behind. They'll deal with that. That is so much Zerg. The Disruptor so far, they have been slightly underwhelming, and Classic weathers the first wave, but that's without Roach speed. And I mean, it's just a matter of time before the Swarm Hosts are ready in yet again.
This be a dream scenario to have a Warp Prism out, right? And have a Prism on the other side of the map. You warp in a couple of Zealots, you keep Serral busy. These slow Roaches obviously look very funky. I just think that Classic misread the game a little, because this was definitely not the moment to invest in that Fleet Beacon and the second Stargate. What he needed to do was build as many static defenses as possible and crank out as many units as possible, as another wave of Locusts is going to land. It's going to settle for an Archon on the right side. First Archon goes down, second Archon will fall as well. Serral does a great job in avoiding these Purification Novas, and look at the amount of minerals that Classic is currently working with. He's got gateways for days, but he just cannot spend his money.
I want to see the resources lost up here, Kev, because I think, yeah, Serral's actually trading way better against a Protoss player with a Roach-heavy army. You don't often see that. Even this little run by over here as well. The shield battery overcharge has to be used in the natural, but it will do absolutely nothing with the amount of Roaches that are marching on in here. And Serral, he's going for the main base, might sprinkle out units, and he's going to see something very important. That Stargate is making something special.
Yeah, he's going to see the carriers. Classic has sent a lot of units into his main base to deal with that Roach run-by, but it obviously means that in the front, the gates are open, and here come the Roaches and Ravages once more. The Locusts will gun down that Nexus, and even these Disruptors could technically be in a tiny bit of trouble. Classic it does not feel like he's got enough army supply. Like, he just didn't have enough units. He was spending a lot of money on production facilities and then obviously on transitions into the late game, but he just didn't really have the right amount of units. And by the time that he's finally gonna get something out of these Stargates, I mean, Serral's gonna show up with 15, 20 Hydras and even a couple of Vipers on the production tab already.
Yeah, he's low on the economy, like 66 drones. It's not the craziest, but Zergs tend to want to be in the high 80s kind of thing, but with the Swarm host, they're very supply inefficient, but they're going to start bleeding out over here into the natural, and oh, this is just a dead Nexus. This is not what Classic wants to be dealing with right now.
So Classic goes from a 4-base Protoss to a 2-base Protoss as he ends up losing the robotics facility as well. That's obviously a big one because you do want to make sure that the disruptor count stays high. He's got a decent amount of them. There definitely is like a tiny chance for Classic, but it really comes down to the Purification Novas that he's able to land and the amount of carriers he's able to get out. Like 2 carriers are probably not going to cut it, but 4 carriers and 5 disruptors, well, every Protoss will start dreaming a little then.
They might start dreaming, but these Vipers on the field, they're going to start working on these disruptors. Nice job by Serral, and rinse and repeat will be the name of the game for him. The sentry is getting warped in, and it's just in time to stop these roaches from again going into that main base. So nice play by him. Serral now gets super confirmation that it is multiple carriers, but the disruptors, ooh, trying to keep them alive with the disruptor shots, and ooh, does actually keep that disruptor alive by the skin of its teeth, but again, oh, no, they are not kept alive whatsoever. A juicy disruptor shot just to make sure that he kind of softens the blow a little bit, but not what you can be having.
I mean, that's a nightmare because the man lost his Robo. We saw that Robo go down earlier. The Hydra count is going to get very high. There is a Templar Archives. We are warping in a couple of High Templars at this point, and obviously these High Templars could lend a feedback. Storm and carriers can be obviously very good against Hydras as well, but the disruptors are a whole lot better because the Storm can take out your own interceptors, and it just feels at the moment Classic is too low on units. Serral may have lost a bunch of roaches, but he has immediately replaced that supply with better units. More Hydras, Vipers, and even some Lurkers down the line.
Yeah, Serral, he's got to max here, and he's going to start building up a bank, and he's just utilizing these Swarm hosts really nicely, just dealing damage over here at the natural. It's not what Classic wants to be dealing with. He's down 9 probes from this attack, 10. Now Nidus is going to start joining the field.
If you look at the production tab, you'd think that Serral is like ultra rich, right? And he's a 6-base Zerg with 95 drones, but Serral is affording a lot of the very expensive stuff simply because he has not been losing a lot of units in this game. Double Up Duck goes off, -2 carriers, and that's obviously a big loss. It takes a long time to rebuild carriers. And you mentioned the cost efficiency earlier, Ben. This is turning into one of the most cost-efficient Zerg games we have ever seen against the Protoss. Because I believe Classic has lost 4,000 resources right now in a PvZ. Make it 6. Like, that's insane.
It's really insane. He's about to lose his space as well. Oh, I love the switch onto that shield battery overcharge there. He tried to pop it to keep that Nexus alive. Serral was very quick to find out what was happening there. And again, oh my goodness, this is like reminiscent of Polt when he's going for the Nexus sniping, isn't it?
Carriers only have +1 as well. Classic probably just does not feel that he's got the time or the resources to fire up +2 air weapons. Serral is slowly but steady getting a couple of Corruptors. Serral obviously still needs to be careful because for all the great things that he has done, he is a Zerg that's been relatively low in the drone department. And if he takes one bad fight near an overcharged battery, or if he eats a couple of storms to the face, like Serral does not have the kind of economy where he can just rebuild 20 Hydras and 9 Corruptors.
No, and we've got to remember that supply that he has, even though it's only 65 drones, those Swarm hosts, if they're on cooldown, like pretty much they're being used to obliterate the bases and the economy of his opponent, they're not necessarily the greatest in the fights, especially with the amount of Storm that we have available.
Yeah, +2 air weapons on the way now as well. That carrier count is still growing. Serral has been building Corruptors for a fair bit. We are looking at 8. That's not a scary amount though. Obviously the 15 Hydras, 8 Corruptors and 2 Vipers together, especially with Spore Crawler support, they're going to be totally fine against 6 carriers. But Serral still needs to be careful. For as an amazingly clean game as he has played, he's playing a dangerous game because we're not looking at these crazy late-game Zerg banks that we are very used to.
I tell you what, Classic's climbing in supply, and he's doing so with very valuable units here. And if he was to get a mother... I like the stasis trap as well, but these High Templars do get sniped over here, and 13 more probes do fall. Man, these Locusts deal so much damage.
Those storms did more harm than good.
Yeah, they certainly did. This Nidus will get taken out over here, but Serral's just popping here and everywhere. Random carrier. That's so sad for him. He's trying to get above the 160 supply mark, but Classic just, he can't get any luck, and everywhere we look, it's just Serral taking these little fights that are just working out so well for him. Oh, I want to look at the resources lost again, because this is actually ridiculous. Twice as efficient.
Yeah, unseen numbers. Honestly, things that we very, very rarely see in a ZVP. Of course, if it was ever going to happen, it has to happen with a swarm host build to some degree. But it's not just the swarm hosts that have been able to find great trades. Serral's able to punish every little mistake that Classic makes. Every single time a unit is a bit too far forward, Serral's there to capitalize on those mistakes. Classic still trying, and he's still allowed to dream. If he just gets a few more carries, he gets that +2 upgrade, a very important one. And even the Mama ship out, he's absolutely allowed to dream. But it's not going to get any easier because we have not just a bunch of lurkers on the field. I think the spore crawler count is relatively high as well. And obviously Classic is going to have a very difficult time cleaning up spore crawlers that are protected by lurkers since he lost all those disruptors a while ago.
And he's allowed to dream, but I think this is starting to turn into a nightmare here, Kev. He's trying to get something done here with these zealots, and there's a lot of random spores here, there, and everywhere, and I like that from Serral, realizing that his army isn't necessarily the strongest supply efficient thing, but here again, bleeding out, can't take another base. Nice little win from Classic in the middle here, trying to move out into the creep and eliminate the spore and the pushing there. Does lose the middle base, or in fact, is it still alive? But the gas was already taken on it anyway.
I love that dance there between the Vipers and High Templars. Serral looking for a freebie, wondering if he's able to get an abduct off. Classic aware of it, so he's kind of moving the carriers back and the High Templars forward, trying to land a couple of the feedbacks, because perhaps that's all he needs, right? A couple big feedbacks, then deploy all the interceptors and just go for it. Because 8 carriers can absolutely steal games. We've seen that time and time again. This game may not feel like it's gone great for Classic, and the supplies may not look very promising for him, but he does have a terrifying army, and he absolutely has the kind of army that can win a fight very decisively, and that's obviously what he needs, right? Like a little bit of a trade and a small victory is not what Classic is looking for, but these are the kind of Protoss armies that can just destroy a Zerg force.
And even there's going to lose this natural Nexus again for I don't know what, the umpteenth time here. I almost want to see what the Nexus loss count is this game, because it's actually crazy. How many Nexus do we have there? 5 Nexus going down. He's now switching out that Hydralisk supply for more Corruptors and Infestors. Serral is one of the absolute best players when it comes to spellcaster control, and I don't see any place where Classic can do any damage whatsoever.
I think Classic was
23 probes, Kev!
What?
He's on 23 probes!
Yeah, he's been bleeding them out, man.
He's so dead!
But he has an army.
The
problem is every second that goes by at this point, obviously Serral's bank is growing, and that does mean that even a decisive victory in the fight, if we're ever going to see that fight, may not actually be enough, because obviously Serral will be able to rebuild 20 Corruptors in the near future, and that's where it's going to become a very big problem. Corruptor count already looking quite healthy. It's a couple storms, a couple feedbacks, and 11 carriers with +2. That is basically the dream. And if Serral had no spore crawlers, I would honestly still kind of believe that there's a small chance with a little bit of Protoss magic. But I think the 29 spore crawlers, that's honestly the biggest problem here for Classic.
And that number's ever growing here, like from 28 to 33, and just moving out. Like, your ground army's kind of useless against these lurkers, and Serral, he's still managing to be aggressive behind it as well. He's killing Classic from the inside, and look at this, look at the positioning.
Don't think we have an observer with his army either. Now, I don't think that the Infestors have Neuroparasite yet, but that's obviously something to keep in mind. It does feel that Classic is just running out of steam. You're starting to see it a little bit in his posture as well. He's looking for an opening, but there are no openings. But he also knows the longer he waits, the worse he gets. So he's just gonna go for it. We see the Shroud going down, and that means that these Interceptors are not going to have a good time battling these units on the ground. A Parasitic Bomb lands on the carriers, a Fungal lands on the carriers.
Oh, look at that supply. Serral is still maxed out here. The Storm's landing on his own army. All of the Protoss absolutely being obliterated in the skies. And GG, Serral moves on to the semi-final.